Hello, my little puppies. Today I am bringing you an absolutely gorgeous pattern that I've made in collaboration with Vita Lifestyle, who's supplied all the yarn for me. I think this sweater turned out so amazingly gorgeous, and if you love making granny squares, then this is the pattern for you. So let's start crocheting. The yarn that I'll be using today is all from Vita Lifestyle. I'm using a DK weight yarn that's 80% merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% nylon, so it's super comfortable and stretchy. This color that I'm showing you is Cold Brew. I'm also using the color Pine Cone. This color is called Twilight Time, Strawberry Dream. And the star of the show, this color called Wildflowers and Wild Horses. It's only available for a limited amount of time, so if you want to grab your hands on this beautiful, stunning rainbow yarn, you gotta do it fast. To make the granny squares, I use a 5mm crochet hook, and I used a 3.75mm crochet hook for all of the navy trim. Some other tools that you might need are scissors, a tape measure, and I also use some stitch markers just to keep my place and so I don't have to count as often. The granny squares are the bulk of this project, so if you don't know how to make one, I have a fabulous video on how to make granny squares and how to change color with granny squares. Go watch that, then come back, okay? But let's talk about the specifications of the granny squares. So I made 17 granny squares. Each granny square is 6 rows. In the corner of each granny square, I only chain 1, and then in between each of the clusters for the granny square, I don't have any chains. I just move over cluster to cluster, no chains. As for the colors of the square, I'll start off with a solid color yarn, then I'll move on to the rainbow, then a solid, then the rainbow, then a solid, and then I'll finish with the rainbow yarn. And each row of the solid colored yarn is just a different color that I've chosen from my yarn color palette. In addition to making the 17 granny squares, we're also going to make only 2 granny rectangles, I'm calling them, which is just a granny square cut in half. So I'm going to start just how I would start making a regular granny square. I'm going to chain 2 or chain 4. I like to chain 2 because I like to live on the edge. Slip stitch into the first chain, and then instead of making 4 double crochet sets with the chain 1 in between, I'm going to make 3 double crochet sets with the chain 1 in between. Capiche? Then I'm just going to fasten this row off and start my next row. So I'm going to attach my yarn just in the top of the very first chain 3 that we did to start this row. Then I'm going to chain 3. Then I'm going to move into the first corner and I'm going to make a corner. So I'm going to do 3 double crochets, chain 1, and do 3 double crochets. Then I'm going to move into the next space, which will be another corner. So again, another 3 double crochets, chain 1, and 3 double crochet. To end this row, I'm just going to make 1 double crochet right in like that very last stitch in that very corner of the very last stitch of the row. Then fasten off my yarn and start on my next row. So for row 3, I'm going to start right where I started row 2, and I'm going to insert my yarn right in that corner stitch and then chain 3. Unlike the previous row, now you can see we have like a little gap there where we can put 2 more double crochet. So basically what I'm going to do is chain 3 and then put 2 double crochet right in that first immediate gap. And now I'm going to move on to my corner. Once I'm done with my corner, again, I have a little gap and we're just going to kind of make, you know, the granny square like normal. And then once you're done with this row, we're going to finish it together. So I've finished my second corner and now I'm going to put 2 double crochet right into that very last gap. And then for me, for my third and final double crochet, I like to put it right in the last corner stitch of the previous row's last double crochet, because that just anchors everything together and it makes the lines just look a lot prettier. And that's how you finish this row. So now I'm just going to fasten off and start my next row. Now, instead of starting this next row off with a cluster set, just like row 2, I'm going to start this row off with a chain 3. And then I'm going to move on to that next space and put 3 double crochet in that next space. I'm going to finish this row exactly how I finished row 2. So now I'm just going to crochet the rest of the row like a normal granny square, and let's finish this row together again. So I've done my last set for this row, and now I'm just going to put my last double crochet in the very corner of the very last stitch from the previous row, and that is how you do row 4. So for row 5, I'm going to start this row exactly like how I started row 3 with a double crochet set. So I'm going to chain 3, which counts as a double crochet, and do 2 more double crochets in that little space. And then I'm going to crochet this row like normal. And then when I get to the end of the row, I'm going to end this row with a set of double crochet. So when I end row 5, I'm going to put 2 double crochets in that last space, and then I'm going to put my last double crochet in the very corner of the last row's stitch. Let's do the last row together as well. So for the last row, instead of starting the row with a set of double crochet, I'm just going to start the row with a chain 3 and then move on to the next space over and do 3 double crochet the rest of the granny square like normal, and I'm going to end this granny square with my very last double crochet in the very last corner stitch of the previous row. And that is how you make half a granny square, or at least that's how I'm making half a granny square in this very moment. I don't really know if this is a proper way. I just kind of made this up. Now that all the granny squares and granny rectangles are made, here is how I'm assembling the front panels. I have a row of 3 granny squares stacked on top of each other, and then right next to them I just have 1 granny square and then a granny rectangle stacked on top of that granny square. And I seamed all of my squares together using a flat slip stitch. You can seam up your squares however you like. This is just the way that I like to do it. And when I'm seaming up this granny rectangle / half granny square, I just want to make sure it lines up halfway on the other granny square as well. And this is what the back panel looks like. It's literally a 3x3 square. And I also seamed up this square using a flat slip stitch as well. Now that I have my back panel all seamed together and my front panels all seamed together, it's time to attach all the panels together. So I'll lay out my back panel right side facing up, and then I'll lay down my 2 front panels right sides facing inward, and then I'm just going to seam up the side until the end of our half granny square, and then I'm also going to seam up the shoulder, which is just 1 granny square in length. So here's what it looks like all seamed together, and now it's time to do the sleeves, and I just wanted to give you a little preview of what the sleeve is going to look like, so that way you know what's going to happen. And let's get into these sleeves. I'm going to attach my yarn in the armpit of the sleeve, and I'm going to attach it in the spaces between my crochet cluster sets. There is a specific color pattern that I'm doing. You obviously don't have to follow my specific color pattern for the sleeves, but if you are, I'm starting with my pink yarn, and I'm going to attach my yarn and chain 3 and then do 2 more double crochets in this space, and then I'm just going to keep crocheting the double crochet sets all around the armhole in the little spaces between my, granny square sets. And then when we kind of get around to like a corner of the granny square, I am adding double crochet sets to the corners of the granny squares. So if you see a corner of a granny square where like we chained 1 previously, I am going to be putting a double crochet set in the corners of the granny squares when I come around to these little areas. And I'm just going to crochet in my double crochet sets all around the armhole. And once I've made all of my double crochet sets all around the opening of the armhole, I'm going to finish my row just slip stitching into my original chain 3. Then I'm going to fasten off my yarn, and then I'm going to change colors. Okay people, as you can see, I'm putting some stitch markers around my armhole. I'm just putting a stitch marker like every other cluster set or every few cluster sets, because those stitch markers are where I'm going to decrease, and you kind of want to spread them out a little bit. It doesn't really matter where you put them, but I'm just putting them here as a visual aid for you and also for me, so then I don't have to count as much. So I'm putting 4 stitch markers in this row because I'm going to do 4 decreases in this row, and I'm going to show you how to do the decreases right now. I promise it's not annoying. Decreases are always really scary for me, but I promise it's going to be okay. So I'm going to use my rainbow yarn now, and I'm going to start just in this corner area of the armhole. Whenever I start a new row, I like to start it just in a different space because I'm using different yarn. It just makes everything look better. I'm going to, attach my yarn, chain 3, and then do 2 double crochet in the space where I chose to start. And then I'm going to make another double crochet set until I get to the space before for my stitch marker. Basically, what I'm going to do is instead of crocheting into that space, I am going to crochet into this double crochet set. So I'm going to insert my hook in between the stitches. It doesn't really matter which one. And I'm going to make a double crochet set. I understand this might be like annoying for some people because they want everything to be even. I find that this method works out well because I can't even tell where I've decreased, and it just makes the decreasing gaps a lot less noticeable. So then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to skip the space right next to this double crochet set. I'm going to skip that space, and then I'm going to crochet in the next space over, and that is how you decrease. So I have one decrease down and 3 more to go, but let's do one more decrease together. Again, I'm going to skip over the space right before my stitch marker, and I'm going to crochet a double crochet set right in between the stitches of this double crochet set where my stitch marker is. And then when I am done doing all of those double crochets, I am going to then skip over the next immediate space and crochet in the space next to that. So that's 2 decreases done, and I have 2 more to go in this row. And I'm going to finish off this row just how I finished off the last row by slip stitching into my first chain 3. For row 3, I'm switching colors. Now I'm using my green yarn, and I am just going to crochet this row totally normal, no decreases, just like row 1. Row 4, I'm back to my rainbow yarn again, and for row 4, we are going to decrease 4. So we're going to do 4 decreases in this row, okay? Get out your stitch markers, but you got this. I believe in you. For row 5, I'm using the coffee colored yarn, and this is just a regular schmegular row, no decreases. For row 6, I'm back to my rainbow yarn, and in this row, I am only doing 2 decreases, just 2 for row 6. So here's what I've got going on thus far. I did 6 rows of, decreasing every other row. And then row 7 to 27, I'm going to crochet like normal, no decreasing. And I want to show you my color pattern as well. The entire repeating color pattern is pink, rainbow, green, rainbow, coffee, rainbow, navy, rainbow, repeat. Okay, so I've crocheted up to row 27. Here's what that's looking like, and I'm gonna do a little measurement check as well. And up to row 27, it's about 11.5 inches long. So now I'm gonna start tapering off the sleeve. Row 28 is gonna be a decrease row. I'm only gonna decrease by 1, and then every other row I'm gonna decrease by 1. So 29 will be a regular row, 30, I'll decrease by 1, 31 will be a regular row, 32, I'll decrease by 1, so on and so forth until row 40. And row 40 will be our last row before we do the cuff. So I've completed 40 rows, and this comes out to be about 17.5 inches. Now I'm going to break out my 3.75 millimeter crochet hook because I'm going to do the cuffs for the sleeves now. So instead of crocheting into the spaces, I'm now going to focus on crocheting into the double crochet stitches. So I'm going to attach my yarn to any stitch really, and then I'm going to chain 11. So 10 plus 1. Now I'm going to single crochet down the row, and I should have 10 single crochets in total. Now that I'm back to the base of the sleeve, I'm going to slip stitch twice into the double crochets of the sleeve, and this will anchor the cuff. So now that I've slip stitched twice, I'm going to turn my work. And as you can see, here are the 2 slip stitches that I just did, but I'm going to skip over those 2 slip stitches and back loop only single crochet up the row. When I get to the top of the cuff, I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work and do that all over again. This is the part of the project where I am constantly counting because I do not want to get my stitches messed up. So now for the rest of the cuff, I'm only back loop only single crocheting. I'll explain it one more time for you guys. I'm back loop only single crocheting down the row. When I get to the base of the sleeve, I'm going to slip stitch twice into those double crochets. Then I'm going to turn my work, and then I'm going to skip over those 2 slip stitches and back loop only single crochet up the row and chain 1, and then I'm going to repeat that over and over again until I get back to the start of my cuff, and then I'll just seam that up. And the cuff is about 2 inches in length. And there we go, we have a cute little cuff. After I'm done with all of my sleeves and all of my cuffs, I'm going to go to the very bottom of my sweater, and I'm going to do the exact same trim all around the bottom of the sweater. And I'll just reiterate that again. Attach my yarn. The only thing that I'm changing is that instead of chaining 11, I'm going to chain 9, but everything else is the same. Single crochet down the row, slip stitch twice into the double crochets, skip over the slip stitches, back loop only, single crochet up the row, chain 1, turn my work, sew on, and so forth until I am done with the trim around the bottom of the sweater. Okay, now I got to do the trim around the opening of the sweater as well. So I'm going to start right in the corner of the trim that we just finished, right in this bottom corner. And I am just going to do the exact same thing that I did for the bottom trim. Chain 9, single crochet down the row, slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, skip over those 2 stitches, back loop only, single crochet up the row. You know the drill at this point. And I'm just going to do this to the entire opening of the sweater until I get to the bottom of the trim on the other side. And then I'm going to block this sweater. And here's a finished cardigan. I am so proud with how this piece turned out. I also made a PDF pattern for this as well. Everything will be linked in my description. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and please tag me if you make this, okay? Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.